Dwi ddim ond eisiau dweud diolch yn fawr I chi I gyd, y pobl sy'n byw yma yn y pueblo o Powake, ac mae'n amser arbennig iawn dod yma bob blwyddyn. So I'm going to talk today, it's sort of like part 2 or part 3. I was invited here to talk about 3 years ago, and I talked about how quickly a language goes from being spoken to having to disappearing. And that was sort of the first half of the talk, and the second half of the talk I gave was about creating or observing where in the community language is being used so that more emphasis and more attention can be put on those aspects of life. And I thought, well, I didn't really cover as much as I'd hoped to. So I'm going to kind of expand on what I talked about 3 years ago and get into detail about where and when and with who you can speak the language to once you learn yourself, once you become a speaker yourself. So there's all kinds of videos on YouTube. If you go to the ILI website, and there'll be links to all these videos on YouTube of previous presentations at this symposium. And there's lots of great stuff there. Now, dwi wedi copio lluniau o Serena. I'm totally copying Serena's pictures. I think it's a great segue. She ended with fireworks, and I'm starting with fireworks. So, and she talked about the journey to becoming conversational. And now I'm going to talk about, all right, so now you are. So whatever process you did, whatever method of learning, no matter how long it took, you're now a speaker. Congratulations. You've done it. So we've got fireworks going on. Well done. Awesome. And it's not saying that you're fluent. It's not saying that you're ready to be a great orator or poet or what have you, but you can now talk to anybody about most topics and be comfortable in kind of living your day-to-day life in the language. Congratulations. So now what? So much of your life in the past, 2, 3, 4 years has been spent on I'm learning, I'm studying, I'm memorizing, I'm practicing, I'm finding anyone I can talk to. Okay, now I've done it. And a lot of the time speakers will have, or learners will have this moment, this magical moment when you realize that you're a speaker. I remember my moment was I went to a cultural festival in Wales called the Eisteddfod, and I lost my wallet. Now, not being from there, wallets are very important because it has all my ID and ways for me to get back to Canada, and this is bad news. So I went to had like a little police kiosk, and I went in there to give a report. Agnesi yn Gymraeg, and I did it in Welsh. And I did it without thinking. I just walked in and just started saying, dwi wedi colli, I totally lost it. And I found it, by the way, I just left it on the bus. It fell out of my pocket. But it was one of those moments where, geez, like I'm a speaker now. Right on. But now what do I do? Now what do I do so I don't lose it? And I want to revisit 2 topics that were in my 2016 talk that I think are really relevant for what I want to talk about today. So, beth ydi siaradwr? What is a speaker? Right? We talk about speakers all the time. I want to be a speaker. We have so many speakers. So just for today, I'm going to say that a speaker is somebody who can produce new connected speech, right? So I'm not just repeating phrases that I've learned or talking about topics that we did little plays about or dialogues, but I can produce new sentences. And I can understand what other people are talking about. Now, I don't necessarily understand everything, but I can follow along. And when I respond to those people, they can understand me. So I'm not talking about hugely fluent here. I'm talking just about what does it mean to me if I say that I'm a speaker of a language? And then devnedur. So a speaker is different than a user. You can be a speaker and never use a language. Lots of people have kind of ended up on that path all over the world. So a user is somebody who makes the decision to speak their language wherever appropriate. And if you ask me where's appropriate, everywhere is appropriate. But somebody who makes a decision that, no, I'm going to speak my language. And I choose to speak to everybody else who understands it. Even people who understand it but don't like to talk for whatever reason. If I'm a user, I'm going to talk to them in the language. And a user also chooses to pass on that language to others. And this is a really big point. If you're in a place that has, I don't know, we got 100 speakers. 100's pretty good. But speakers don't necessarily pass the language on to others. And a lot of the time the language dies with them. A user, on the other hand, is somebody who says, I got the gift of the language, and I'm going to spread it to anybody who wants it, who asks. So a user is somebody who continues the language into the future. And if you're only a speaker, you're not a total dead end, because maybe we can turn you to the light side of the force. Change you from a speaker into a user. So I hate to pick on Ireland, but I'm going to, because they keep really good statistics. And the language revitalization movement of Irish in Ireland, so Gaelic, Irish, has been going on for over a century. And check out the figures. So according to the census, there are 1.7 million speakers of Irish. That's like a third of the population or something, quarter of the population. That's pretty good. That's really good. Oh, it's fine. No problem. Irish will be safe in Ireland. And here's some kids going to an Irish medium school. There's Irish schools all over the place. Gaelic's fine. No worries. It's no worries until you check the users number, which is, depending on who you ask, around 30,000 people. And that's a pretty optimistic number of people who use the language daily. So that's about just under 2% of Irish speakers are Irish users. So that doesn't bode too well for passing the language on, for giving the language to other people. So what's going on here? What's a discrepancy? We can make an assumption that a good proportion of that 1.7 million people would like to use the language every day, right? Sure, there's people who had to take it in school and were happy to leave school and never have to touch the language again, fine. But let's say there's a good proportion of people that want to use the language, or if given the opportunity, would. So how can we turn those speakers into users? How can you get that number from 20, 30,000, maybe up to 50,000 people use it every day? There's a great video series on YouTube. I can't remember what it was called, but it just sort of occurred to me, of a gentleman who is fluent Irish speaker, and he films himself wandering around the country trying to speak to people, trying to get things done, like buying milk at a store or whatever, and he can't do it. And it's really disappointing and frustrating. But if I learn Irish, if I'm one of those 1.6 million people, 1.7 million people who speaks Irish, who do I talk to? The world is English. Everywhere I go, English, 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 English. Irish just lives in my head. Who can I talk to? The second you leave your immersion environment, if you're going to an immersion school or whatever, the second you leave that immersion environment, everything's English. And no matter how good your intentions are learning, no matter how good you were at speaking, any time spent away from the language will start that, let's call it rustification, right? You're starting to get rusty in the language. It's a muscle. You have to keep it active. Keep on using it every day. But in a lot of Indigenous language communities, the second you step out of the language center or the classroom or your school, it's just all English. And that doesn't bode well. That gives you that 1%, 2% of people who actually use it every day. All right. So I started thinking about this cycle, because in a place like Ireland or even in Wales, you have this cycle of so many speakers but only so many users, and it cycles around every generation, every century. And so I started making diagrams. And then I looked at my diagrams and I thought, this is so complicated. Let me try and simplify it. So I'm up at 2 a.m. last night trying to simplify all these diagrams. So maybe they'll work for you. Maybe in trying to explain them, I'll realize that they're still a mess. But I'm using these diagrams to model what happens in an environment where you can learn a language and then what do you do with it. So this here is a little attempt at modeling what happens when you learn a language in a school environment. So I'm going to start at parents/home. So let's make the assumption that when you grew up, your parents didn't use the native language. They used English. Okay, so I'm starting on the upper left here. Parents' home, they only use English. Maybe they're speakers, maybe not. It's hard to say, right? It doesn't really matter if I'm a learner. They got to use it. Otherwise, I'm not getting anything from it. So I colored the arrow in red. There's no it's like a stop sign. So I go to school. Maybe as a child, I go to school and I learn both languages. Right, so I know English from home, I know the native language from school, and I use them both. I think it would be pretty common, the immersion schools I've seen, the kids use the language in the classroom, they use English outside when they're playing. But, they know both, that's pretty good. The kids know both. And then when they finish with school and become a young adult, they know both, but inevitably use English. That's interesting. Why would they do that? Where's my graphics here? So the arrow now turns red because those young adults stop using the language. And so when they become parents, whether they know it or not, it doesn't matter. They're using English, but that's okay. They can send their kids to immersion school, and the cycle continues. It goes round and round. Now, maybe there's some elders who speak. Maybe there's some other people around who speak the language. They would probably be bilingual. They know both languages. Are they users? Well, they might be. They might use the language, but who are they talking to? Are they talking to the kids that go to the school? Are they talking to the parents raising children? Are they talking to the young adults who are learning, or do they just talk to their brother or sister or their friends? Right? What I'm saying is users spread the language wherever they can. And if these other speakers aren't doing it, then, they're not adding to breaking this cycle. They're not helping to break this cycle. And then some people move away, right? They go to the immersion school or they learn the language. They move away and it becomes English only. Because it's really hard to maintain a language when you're outside a group of speakers. All right. Did I add anything else to that? All right. So this is the key transformation. When you're in school, you could be using both languages. When you become a young adult, you only use English. And why? Why is that? So we'll talk about that today. All right. Here's another model, the adult learner. So this isn't, maybe there's no immersion school. Maybe I figured out that language is what I want to do as an adult. I didn't get the language from my parents at home, so we have our stop there. And I learn in my 20s or 30s or 40s. I know both languages. I use both languages. There are elders and other speakers. These are, let's say, the people feeding me the language I need to learn how to speak. So it's not coming from home, it's not coming from a school, it's coming from other speakers. And then I go into the world. I go back in, what my father used to call the real world. And in the real world, I know both languages. I learned English as a kid, I learned the native language as I grew up. I want to use both, but really, I'm only using English most of the time. And the other speakers, they're not really helping my parents. They're busy helping the people who are specifically learning the language. That's their calling, that's what they're doing. But the other speakers got to be kind of helping everybody. And so I want to use both. I want to use Welsh and English, but really I only use English in the world outside of talking about language stuff. I don't know if you're like this, but if asked, what topic can you speak most fluently about in Welsh? And I would say I can speak most fluently in Welsh about speaking fluently in Welsh. I'm really good at talking about language, but that's not like what I spend a lot of the time in the world doing. So I actually use English a lot. And then again here the focus is, for me, a speaker, putting it back towards learners, but I'm not putting my knowledge in the language into being a parent. So the cycle stops. So peryglan, what are the weak points? Where does that, we want a cycle that's self-sustaining, and where does it break down? We have successful child speakers, and we want to turn them into parents who use the language. And there's something in the middle there that's breaking down. And there's a problem of forgetting, becoming rusty. But that's fixable. A little bit of practice, you'll be back at it again. So maybe it's okay, well, a value, not value is the language important to me, but value as in, is the language important to what I do every day in my life? Is it useful? If my language isn't useful, if I'm living in Canada and I got no reason to speak Welsh to anybody, it's gonna drop off and I won't bother teaching it to my kids. If I'm a successful adult learner, what happens between me using the language in a classroom to me using the language in the community? What happens in the middle that breaks down? And I think I need somewhere to go. I need someone to talk to. I need something to do in the language. I do lots of stuff every day. Somebody was asking me, so what do you do? And I go, well, I curl. It's a very Canadian thing to do. I throw big rocks down the ice and people sweep them. Is that something I can do in Welsh? Well, not right now. Is it something that maybe I could try? That would give me somewhere to go. That would give me something to do, and that would give me teammates to talk to. So at least 2 days a week, I'm speaking Welsh to people. That's just one example. So, two concepts that I want us to be thinking about during the rest of my talk here. One is anegni, sort of not moving, inertia. And inertia is that however things are going now, things will keep on going that way. The world likes status quo. And in terms of language, once a language like English is entrenched in an activity, it is very likely to stay in that activity. So if we start curling in English, chances are we're going to keep on curling in English, right? We just got used to it. It's convenient. I know the vocabulary. I know one of the guys doesn't speak too good, so it's okay. Inertia is sort of, it's okay. But the cool thing about inertia is once you get something moving, it keeps on going. So you need that push of energy. You're pushing that elephant to move, but once it's going, it's going to keep on going. So inertia is something good to think about. Why is it that people drag their feet and I'm a speaker of the language, but I don't talk to anybody? That's inertia. And the other one, angreven, the tendency for things to become less useful. And so here we go. Entropy is a good English word for that. So left on their own, any system, any process will become disorganized. So here's a nice system. I have a coffee cup up here. I let go of it, smashes into pieces. That's entropy. If I pick up all those pieces and drop them, they're not going to form a coffee cup, right? Things won't repair themselves on their own. If I want to repair the coffee cup, I got to get some glue and start piecing everything together. So if I just sort of stand back and say, you know what, we got speakers, we got people who, can talk the language, it'll be fine. It's always been fine. It'll keep on being fine. We got 100% of population speaks, and then in 3 generations, that coffee cup falls, smashes into pieces, because nobody put any energy into it, or not enough people put enough energy into it. So to keep anything useful, vibrant, alive, energy has to always be put into that process, into that speaking, using, learning process. And guess what? English is boundless, right? I got English coming in my phone. I got English coming through my TV. I'm speaking English right now. English is everywhere, so that's all energy being fed into kind of my mind. So English is easy. English has no entropy, right? Because there's so much energy going into it. A gentleman I spoke to in Aotearoa said, our language is on permanent life support. It's hooked up to all these machines and electricity to keep it alive. And that's sort of what I mean, right? If left to their own devices, things will kind of go. So that's where I want to start from. And the topic from a couple years back was domains. So domain is like a term, and I'm using it to refer to a place where your language is welcome, a place where people use the language, a place where, a place that sort of feeds its own energy into speakers to make them want to use it. And a domain can be good for speakers who already know the language, give them an opportunity to use it. And a domain is also great for learners to feel safe. This is where the language is spoken. I don't have to prove myself today. I don't have to defend my decision to use the language. This domain is safe. So a quick review of domains from the last talk is, this is from a community called Carrez in Brittany, in the northwest of France, and it was done in the 1980s, where people looked at all the different spaces in the community that have language associated with them. So I'm not going to go through every one here, but like family, the street, in a cafe, working on the farm, going to school, watching TV. These are all places where humans interact with language. And so they divided up the community space into these different domains. And after doing so, they ranked it. They said, is this a place where language is used? Is this a place where the language is never used? Or, is there some wiggle room there? Is there a place where maybe there's a bit of language and it's a good spot to increase usage? So they discovered that language is strong in the home, it's strong on the farm, it's strong where elders get together to speak and hang out, and it's strong in cafes. And cafes are sort of a uniquely Breton establishment where the old guys go to hang out, after work, and it's in France, so smoke cigarettes and talk to each other in the language, and that's seen as a safe place, and all the old guys speak the language there. So all these places are where your family and friends are, so they're safe, right? These are all people I know, these are all people who know I speak, and I know they speak. The language is weak where there's strangers around. So in school, in media, at your job, in a chain store. These are all places where you're going to be running into people you don't know. And the language was very weak, very, very weak in these places. So if you start thinking about what are the places in my community, at least judging from this study, schools and media and the workplace are not good locations to use the language. The best locations are where your family and friends are. So I started working about 2 years ago, formally 2 years ago, but Mahgueno and I have been working on the Mohican language for the good part of 8 years. And last time I was down in Wisconsin in August, I thought, why don't we do the same thing? We'll get a bunch of people together and we'll start listing the domains that exist in the Stockbridge Mohican community. And we'll rank them. We'll do just like what they did in Brittany. So I thought let's go a bit further, and we divided stuff up into active use. Are people using the language there now? Another category would be impact. Like, if language were to be used there more often, would it be a big deal in the community? Would it be a big deal for the learners and speakers who are trying to use the language? Another one is, do you got to pay for it? Do I got to go hunting for funding? Another parameter would be resistance. Am I going to bump into hurdles and barriers and walls that'll try and hold me back from speaking my language? Is it inclusive that anybody's welcome? Or is it only a small group of people who can come? And then preparation is, how much work do I got to do ahead of time before this domain, before this space can become language friendly? So we did 10, 15, making this big list, coming up with all these domains, and started asking ourselves, is this where language could be introduced? So we were having the meeting in the library/museum, so this is the first place we were talking about. And so I'm ranking these as 1 to 5, or 0 to 5. 0 is kind of least, 5 is the most. So for instance, resistance was a 0. Everybody in the library seemed really cool about having it as a safe place for the language. The impact, I kind of averaged it out. Some people thought it would be a huge impact if the library had language there, and some people said, well, nobody ever hangs out at the library anyways, so what kind of impact would that make? Oh, but we could get people hanging out in the library, and a discussion begins, which is excellent. Instead of just saying, oh, everybody's welcome. Well, maybe everybody's welcome, but can we get them to come? And then the family center was another one on the list. Is anybody using the language there? Nope. Would it have a big impact? Well, okay, it has a bigger impact if we could get language being spoken in the family center than in the library, but it's got a higher resistance. Maybe some of the people there say, I don't know if we need language here. Maybe a little bit, maybe we'll put a sign up. So there's maybe a bit more resistance there to having the language being used. Now there is no, as far as I'm aware, no like primary school or high school in the community, but there is a Head Start. So why don't we try that? Would it make a huge impact? Sure, everybody thought, yeah, it'll be great. Resistance is at a 5, so that's a really high resistance to get it into a school. Even if the people at the Head Start want language to be used, you have to get certification, you have to apply to a this or a that, and forms must be filled out, and boots must be licked, and bribes must be, I don't know, all these things that have to be done to get the language into that kind of program. So it sounds good, we can get the kids talking, but it's going to be a lot of work to get the language into that situation. And the inclusivity is a 1, and that kind of surprised, I think, everybody at the table. But like I'm in my 40s, I can't just walk into the Head Start and sit there and say, I want to learn too. Or I just want a chance to speak the language, and maybe I'll show up a couple times a month. Right? It's this very small group of people can go to that place and take advantage of the language there. And the last one that I'm including today is Maggie's house. And Maggie will forgive me for using her family as a example here. Maggie's one of the people learning Mohican along with us. Is there active use? Thumbs up. Right? She's not a speaker. Nobody's a speaker of Mohican yet, but she's introducing the language into that place. So there is some active use there. Would it have an impact if her family spoke the language? On a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is a strong impact, we decided it would rank a 10. Right? If her family could start talking to each other in the language, that's massive. It's free. Free is good. There's no resistance, no forms to be filled out, no diplomas to be got to start using the language in your family. Inclusivity is tough because, I can't just pop by Maggie's house whenever I want. Strangers can't pop by, but, that's all right. So when we rank them by that color scheme, where green is sort of for go, this would be a good space as a domain to bring the language in. Look at how good Maggie's house is. And look at how not good kind of everything else was. So this got us thinking. Where do we want to focus effort into? What spaces are amazing places to bring language into? And it turns out we should all go to Maggie's house. Maggie's house is great. So what does this tell us? Looking at the list, they were all institutional. They were all like government-run, council-run institutions. And, to be fair, maybe I asked the question in the wrong way when we started doing this, but I thought it was really eye-opening that every single example was institutional. And what does that mean if everything is institutional? Institutions have high barriers for implementation. I just can't go into the family center and say, all right, it's Mohican language from here on out. Can't do that. They'll say, who are you? But I can do that in my house. I can do that with my family. Bringing language into institutions didn't have the kind of impact that I guess we thought it might. The impact of me as a speaker or learner of the language, a place that I go to 4 times a year isn't high impact. A place where I go every day, where I wake up and go to sleep in a home, that's huge impact. And I'll get to that in a second. And if I create a domain on my own, I can maintain it. If we work really hard and get let's say the Head Start program to start using the language, and it's going awesome, and it's working, and then there's the director retires. I think this was brought up yesterday during the President's Awards. Who's going to take over for me when I'm gone? What if the person who takes over isn't interested in language? And now your domain is gone. What if, like in France, what if the French Constitution decides that speaking Breton is unconstitutional? And we're not going to let you do that anymore. Oh, that couldn't possibly happen here. Well, sure it could. You know, you can't rely on the man to support your actions if it goes against what the man wants you to do. So right now, maybe the institutions are great. Right now, maybe the library, museum, the family center, the Head Start, these are all places where people are keen and eager about the language, and then someone yanks that funding out from under your feet, and that domain disappears. But you know what? If I create my domain independently, they could try all they want. They can kick me out, and they can tell me, you know, you're not living in the right place, or you're not the right kind of guy. You don't get to speak Welsh anymore. Well, you can't tell me that. I made it independently. The other thing we didn't do with the domains was consider anything that friends do together. I spend a lot of time with friends. So what can we do to create domains? Like that cafe in Brittany, what can we do so that my friends and I can speak to each other, my peers? Oh, and yeah, let's all go to Maggie's house. Maggie's house is a great place to go. So, if I'm a learner, so I'm not perfectly fluent. I'm still kind of learning. But I'm conversational, but I'm still kind of learning. It's easy to say, let's all go to Maggie's house. We say that, and then, oh my gosh, there's so many things to do there. So much going on at Maggie's house. We just can't sort of walk in the door and say, all right, Maggie's house is now language only. It's overwhelming at first, the amount of language you use in your daily life, and it's overwhelming how much of that language you don't know because you picked it out of a textbook or whatever. You know, there's a really big difference between language school language and real life language. Anybody who's a second language learner, I'm sure has felt that. Like when I start talking to real people, they're talking about other things. And in Maggie's house, lots is going on. So how can I, as a not fluent, but a speaker, make it more manageable? How can I divvy up what happens at home into smaller chunks, maybe subdomains? And how can I expand this outside my home to other people, to my groups of friends, to the people I go curling with, what have you? So I'm going to give an interlude here. Gwrthwy neibiad, holding firm against something, resisting something. So this is a tale of when one of those special moments when I changed. And I was in a little village called the Cuman in Wales, up in the mountains. And I was hanging out in this place, in a Tafarn Cuman. And it's a Welsh-speaking area. So I was in there talking to this guy I'd never met before, just sat down. And he said, oh, you're learning how to speak Welsh? And, you know, ydw yn dysgwr ydw I. And we started yapping. We started talking away, having a great old time. And I guess we were getting excited, and our voices were going up, and the day was going on, and it was getting busy. And this guy wanders over, sort of like big guy. Big guy wanders over and he goes, I don't want you speaking that anymore. You're talking behind my back. You know, speak something that everybody can understand. Just kind of standing there, looking tough. And I remember in my mind, I think the other guy I was with was, oh crap, what have we got ourselves into? And I thought to myself, all right, this is a moment. This is a pivotal moment in my own life trajectory. Do I let this guy vampire me, suck my blood out, and make me feel small? Or do I resist? I thought, okay, physical pain is transient. It'll go away. I'll heal. He won't kill me. And so I stood up, and I mentioned to my friend, I looked at my friend, and I said, Kavaithya o skolechinta. Can you translate for me? And he said, sure. Shuravo, of course, I'll do my best. And so I said, tell the gentleman that where else can I speak Welsh? Right? I'm in a world where everything is English, 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 and I'm in this tiny little building in a tiny little village in a tiny little country. Where else can I talk? This is all I got, and I can't let you stop me. And so he translated that Welsh into English to the guy. And I think the guy was a bit taken aback, like maybe people don't speak back to this guy, but hey, I'm not from around here, what do I know? And he turned and left. It was one of those Back to the Future George McFly moments, right? Where he gets his fist out there and he punches Biff in the face, and rock and roll is born. So that was a moment. That was a moment, and every second language learner is going to face that. Face that is pain, is depression, is anger. Are any of these things going to get in the way of me speaking? And so I said, no, you're not going to get in my way. I didn't work this hard just to have some, I don't want to disparage the guy because it was coming from shame from him, because he was in a place where he couldn't speak his own language. So I don't want to denigrate that guy, but I now look at it as an opportunity that was given to me to resist and to prove to myself that I'm in this for the long haul. So I thank him. I thank him for almost beating me up. All right. So, domains as a place. That's what we had before. And, okay, so there's the home. Home's a great place. Home's a great domain. Hanging out with my friends. Where do we hang out? Okay, maybe if anyone's in Canada, we hang out at Tim Hortons because that's what we do. But those are big. Those are huge concepts. We're not fully fluent yet. So let's subdivide that up into domains as an event. So, Inhi Magi, Brocknai Sterling, these are the people who are learning the Mohican language with me in Mahgueno. So let's break up their houses into smaller chunks. At Maggie's house, what do? Well, she attends class in the kitchen while baking, which is awesome. She's got her computer there, we do it online, and she's baking away. And so let's talk about baking. Let's make baking an event where we use the language. I think 2 times ago, I was driving out to go back home, driving away from Wisconsin to go back home, and she was flying this drone around in the sky. Okay, let's make flying a drone around in the sky a language activity. Boy, we got to come up with a lot of new vocab, right? But let's make that. Brock and Sterling are 2 brothers who are raising their families together with us, in Mohican, doing the best we can. So what sort of things do they do? I don't know, do they watch Packers games on TV? Yes. Do they go deer hunting or other kind of hunting? Yes. So let's make these aspects, these events in their home, so their home is a safe domain, but let's make these events language only. Let's decide from now on, when the football game's on TV or when we go out hunting, these are things that we do in the language. And so if you're a learner, each of these things is a module. We're just calling them modules. You could have other names for them. And a module is very different from, let's say, a unit in a textbook or a course, like a lesson in a language course. A module, as we kind of dealing with it, is information that you gather together about that domain event. Everything you need to live that domain as a language user. So all the phrases and vocabulary and what kind of conversation goes back and forth. We're not talking about the event. We're not practicing the event. We make sure we got all this information and then go and do it. There's no point learning hunting terminology if you're not going hunting. Right? Then it's not a domain, it's just it's a mind exercise. There's no point learning football, a module, if I don't watch football, because I'm never going to use it. So these domains are for speakers and for users. Speakers and learners. A speaker is, if I want to use the language, I go over to someone's house to watch the football game. So I got a few hours a week, and I can speak the language there. It's a great place for learners because they're going to pick up all this stuff about the language. So we, a couple weeks back, maybe a month ago, we started putting together this module for hunting. Did you see any deer? Yeah, I saw a fawn go into the woods. Masauna, did you hit it? Sta, but not on. No, I missed. No gun. But I'm going to follow the trail of blood that was left behind by the deer. So these are all phrases, that are necessary in the module for hunting. And so the learners or speakers agreed amongst themselves that this is an event that we do. This is something that we do. And we agree that the native language will be the only thing we use during that activity. No matter how inconvenient or what I forget, no sneaking back into English. And these sorts of activities can be done again and again and again and again. All right. So a game peldroid, or watching the football game. So you're sitting back and you're watching the football game, and Napa, go long, right? You're shouting to the TV or whatever, or you can, Thaneta on. Oh, he hit him really hard, hit him to the ground. Or Kanama neane ke pa'an update na anaat. Did you see those guys sack the quarterback? Right? Even speakers of the language might not know this kind of vocab. Right? And the learners aren't going to know it. But we practice ahead of time in this module so that when Friday night or Saturday or Sunday, whatever comes along, and we're sitting in front of the TV, just start throwing these phrases out all the time for speakers and for learners. One more example that I want to give of an event that's a domain is music. And I had Cashton on the band Cashton's image on before. So coming to these symposiums and talking to other people, a lot of folks get excited when a song is done in the language. It could be a traditional song, it could be a popular music, it could be rock and roll or rap or whatever, but some song is done in the native language. And that's interesting. It's kind of cool. It raises awareness, right? Gets people excited about the language. These are all good things. But what if the band speaks English to each other? And what if, let's say, they call up somebody and says, hey, can you translate these lyrics for me? And the band sings them in the lyrics, and when the song is done, they go, thank you very much, we love you, Cleveland, and off they go. So I think more important for revitalization, more important for having users of the language, is to get the band to speak amongst themselves in the language. Make rehearsals and make the concert language domain events. right? So when I go to rehearse, I bring all my equipment, I go to rehearse with the band. The second we plug the amps in, no more English, right? Welsh only, native language only. And that's a bigger deal. That's a bigger deal than one song, one video, one YouTube link, whatever. It's a bigger deal. I'm not saying, I'm not denigrating that at all. What I'm saying is it's bigger for the band members to treat their activity, their event, as a place where they can use the language amongst each other. And event domains have to be real, right? You have social groups, gatherings together, or gatherings already in your communities. And how can you pull those learners in, pull those rusty speakers in, pull those fluent speakers who have nowhere to talk and no one to talk to? Get those guys together in an activity that's fun and that they do anyway, whether that's shooting pool, whether that's bowling, whether that's getting out on the lake, whether anything, but something useful, something that people like to do. And those learners, those rusty speakers will hear "Throw It Long" again and again and again. And if it takes 300, 400, 500 times to say a word before you got it memorized, by the end of the season, you've said it so many times. It's built into your brain. It's built into your neural network. And these social events are open. Other people can come too. Interlude number 2, penderfynu, deciding. This is another thing that I'm copying from Serena's talk and everyone else's talk we've had today, or yesterday as well, is every second language learner is going to have a moment. There's the moment of defense, of resistance that I talked about before, but there's the moment of starting your journey as well. And when I was speaking with people from ILI last year, we were thinking, what do we want to talk about for next year's symposium? And I just had this image in my mind of the night beginning the quest for the Holy Grail, something like that, where you're walking along and you reach a moment, a point in your personal history where an opportunity is put in front of you. I can go this way, I can go that way. And, a good knight, a good Arthurian hero, going back to Welsh stories, a good Arthurian hero gives up everything to go on the quest. They give up security, safety, their family, their livelihood, everything they're prepared to give up to go on this quest. And I think language people, second language learners, have this same decision because I don't know what I'm getting into, but I'm going to choose to go on the quest regardless. And so my pivot point is really, really dull. It's really simple. I walked into a room and they had pamphlets. And it was at a foreign student travel abroad, see the world on the summer. And I thought, okay, I was in there for some other reason. I think I was paying a bill. And there were little pamphlets. And one of the pamphlets said, go to Ireland, learn Irish. 2-month immersion over the summer. I thought that'd be good. Always wanted to learn Irish. Got lots of Irish blood in me. All right, let's do it. So I took the pamphlet. I went home. I opened it up. And it said, oh, yes, we have this exciting program. And you get to stay in a homestay with another family and who are Irish speaking. I don't want to do that. I don't know. It didn't feel right. I don't want to live in someone else's house. I look back on it now, and maybe at my current part of life, I would have said yes. But at that point in my life, I said no. And beside that pamphlet was another one that said, go to Wales, learn Welsh. And I thought, well, I hadn't really thought about learning Welsh. I was sort of always into Irish, I guess. But I picked up that pamphlet, and they have an apartment building, and everyone gets a little room in the apartment building, and that felt right. I said, okay, I'll go to Wales then. So that was my decision point. It's not dramatic, not fascinating from a life growth perspective. It was just me saying, yes, I'll do it. And the second thing that happened is my father, who never understood why I kind of am who I am or I do what I do, but he always supported me, and he said, okay, I'll fly you to Wales, fly you back again. I don't know why on earth you want to do this. Can't you find better things to do with your time? But off you go. So he supported me in that way. So if you're a language knight, a warrior, a ready to go out into the world and grab that language and make it part of you, isn't it great that somebody else said, yeah, I'll support you. I don't know why you're doing it, but I'll support you. So if you're a language learner, when you come to that pivot point, when you come to that decision point, take it. Maybe you won't get another one soon. Take it while you can. And for all those who see a young person grabbing that moment, you support them, even if it doesn't make any sense. Because they're giving up everything. Everything that they have in their life, they're giving up to go forward in the language. All right. So the last kind of domain I want to talk about are personal domains. And so we have a domain as a space, which could be a building. We have domain as an event, what happens, what goes on in that place. And then there's the domain of you and me, one-on-one, Kirk and Spock. What can we talk about a domain being personal between two people? And so I remember when my wife was pregnant with my first kid, and I went to the library and I pulled out all these, raise your bilingual child, because I wanted to learn about, what sort of pitfalls are waiting for me. And in trying to raise my kid in two languages. And what the book told me was that people keep their habits. So, if I meet you for the first time, and we say, hi, how are you? I'm good, thanks. What's up with you? And back and forth. We have decided that English will be our personal domain language. And once that domain language has been decided, once it's been cemented in, it's really, really hard to break that. It just feels strange, In the same token, there's people back in Wales that I've only ever spoke Welsh to. Never heard a word of English from their mouth. I never spoke English to them. And then one day we're in a restaurant in England, and my friend does an order. He orders in English. I think, wow, he's so much smaller. In Welsh, he's this magnificent gentleman, just all power and energy. And I heard him speak English, and it was weird. It was really weird. So, in a personal domain, inertia is a problem. Inertia is a problem. Whatever you start talking when you first meet is likely to be what you continue to speak as you go on. And what you got to do is change that static inertia into movement inertia to get that ball rolling. And, some cultures, like Welsh does this or Korean does this, where you have two ways of saying the word you. There's chi, which is we don't know each other very well, and ti, which means we're now close. We're now brothers and sisters, that kind of thing. And people mark in their relationship when they switch words. They say, okay, now I'm going to start using ti with you. I'm not going to use chi anymore. And you can do this to break your inertia. The person you've been speaking to English with for years and years, you can say, let's change our personal domain. Let's get the ball rolling. And this is a point of no return. It has to be, right? There's no backsies. It's a decision between two people to say, this is a language we're going to use from now on, period, full stop, that's it, that's all. If you're in an immersion context, this is about a week and a half. You should be making this call. You think, geez, a week and a half, I don't know anything. I don't know. I can say hello, goodbye, how are you? I'm hungry. But that's okay. That's okay. You're going to be limited by the sort of topics you can talk about at the beginning. But that's okay. As time goes on, you'll learn more. And it's a small price to pay to create a language personal domain with somebody else. And even if you're both fluent speakers, if you've been speaking English to each other for 40, 50 years, it's going to be weird to switch. And you're going to find yourselves maybe at first a bit limited about what you talk about. But it's a commitment. Language learning happens, we can do it, but it takes commitment. And a commitment isn't just with me, I'm going to do it. Commitment is between you and me. We're going to do it together. And so with that personal domain, with that personal relationship, I can then take that decision that we've made and we can move that into an event. We've both decided that we're going to speak Welsh to each other, so when we go to go curling or go to the football game or go hiking, whatever we want to do, we're going to take our personal energy and move it into an event. Without that energy, no matter how great an idea your event is, we're going to have a language day. It's going to be awesome. They'll fizzle out after a while if the people aren't actually speaking in the language to each other when they go there. English, remember, has all that energy already, and things will just default back to it. And just because you can use the language doesn't mean people will, right? You have that situation. My grandparents both spoke Hungarian, but they never did, which is odd. They raised my mother in a language that wasn't their first language, and they didn't speak it so good. But you need that personal agreement, like, nah, forget it. No more English. We're making a decision. And that energy, where does that energy come from? It's your passion that this is important. It's the success that you see when you start doing this. And it's the growth of your language and the growth of language for other people. So this is beating entropy. To defeat entropy is your decision with another person to say, dim ond yn Gymraeg, only in Welsh. When I say, cyfiaethau mi, could you translate for me? Because I'm not going to speak to this guy in English. And what do you get from that? You get safe places you can speak. What do you get from domains? You get a safe place where I don't have to defend myself. I have safe times to speak where, if somebody says, oh, can't we speak a bit of English? I say, no, we decided. This is Welsh only. This is Mohican only. And I got friends and family and safe people that I can talk to who aren't going to try and derail what we're up to. There's all kinds of places in the world where people are going to try and derail me and derail you. But you know what? In this one place, at this one time, with these people, I'm safe. And I can improve my language. I can be a user of the language. And as that happens, it spreads. Other people get interested. These guys look like they're having fun. They're always laughing. They're excited. They've got close friendships. I want in. Okay, you want in? Man, the language is the key, right? In you come. So this changes that. I'm going back to the beginning now. This changes the model. So we started off with the parents know English and use English. Elders and other speakers, this is different now. They know both languages, but they use the Indigenous language. They now have a personal domain relationship with me to use the Indigenous language. So me as a learner, I know both languages and I can use both languages. It's kind of where we were at the beginning. Maybe there's a school, maybe that feeds into it. It's not necessary, right? I can get everything I need from other speakers. Everything the school gives me is a bonus. It's extra. It's more support. Isn't that excellent? More support. And maybe I'm a learner and I move away. And maybe we got to figure out, how can we create transcontinental domains? What sort of things can we build so that people living far away from each other aren't left in the cold? But that's another conversation for another day. So now, when I'm leaving being a learner, I walk into local domains that elders and other speakers have set up for me, or something that I'm going to create. And in my local domain, I can know both languages, but I use the Indigenous language. That's really different. That's really different because I have a place now, I have something to do, and I have people to talk to. And now when I become a new parent, I know both languages, but I use the Indigenous language because I'm used to it. It's normal. It's what we do every day. And as a new parent, I can now feed into my own kids. I can feed into the local domain, and everything is green and for go. Inertia will continue that cycle going and going and going because we haven't just said, our goal is to create speakers. Okay, good, that's happened, we've done that. Now what's the next goal? My goal is to create spaces for these new speakers to become users. And when they become users, they become parents and pass the language on to their children. And that's what I have to say. Diolch yn fawr I chi I gyd.